Hello, I'm Craig Lieberman. If you don't know who I am, you're not alone. I'm a gearhead who's been tinkering on cars since the 1980s. I've owned more than 40 cars in that time, but I never dreamed that some of my own cars would star in a major movie franchise. My R34 GTR, my Toyota Supra, and my Nissan Maxima all had starring roles in Universal's first two Fast and Furious movies, and I served as a technical advisor to these early films. I've raced open wheel cars, shifter karts, and others. I love all things automotive, and my videos help me share my passion with like-minded people all around the world. Although I've released more than 50 videos covering the cars and the filming of the Fast and Furious movies, there's still more to discuss. You've probably noticed that I've skipped a few cars from the early movies. One such car is Neela's RX-8 from Tokyo Drift. It's not that I was just focusing my videos on the more popular and more elaborate cars and builds, it's just that I never really took the RX-8 all that seriously, to be honest. I mean, it is a rotary, and I do love rotary engine, but having driven a couple of RX-8s, it's just that they felt completely emasculated without a pair of Hiroshima Hurricanes, right? And without those under the hood, I just couldn't get excited about it. With the RX-8 lacking the twin-turbo setup of the RX-7, in my mind's eye, the RX-8 would never rise to superstardom like its younger brother, and so I somewhat dismissed it. Although the chassis is actually quite capable, despite having two extra doors, the RX-8 had handling capabilities nearly equal to many top sports cars of its time and beyond. And because of its handling prowess, it has become a bit of a cult classic. Those in the know knew, the rest of us were left wondering what the attraction was. Well, in 2010, Car and Driver magazine spelled it out clearly when they did a full track test of the RX-8 against several other cars. At the end of their testing, Car and Driver said this of the RX-8: with its excellent steering, the RX-8 was easily the best front-engine rear-drive entrant of the test, serving up scalpel-like demeanor on both road and track. Considering that the other cars in the test group included the R35 GTR, an E92 M3, a Z1 Corvette, a VW GTI, and a Cadillac CTS, that's some pretty high praise. So it's high time for me to get past the RX-8's somewhat effeminate image and recognize this car's undeniable strengths. For those of you who don't know, the RX-8 was first introduced in 2002, and it was originally offered with two engine options: a 4-port 1.3-liter Renesas 13B MSP. These early RX-8s made about 189 to 197 horsepower depending on what transmission you chose and where the car was first sold. The second engine option was a 6-port variant making around 228 to 232 horsepower, again depending on the transmission and where the car was first sold. But multiple trim levels were released during the RX-8's run. There was the NRA RX-8, and it featured a roll bar, a sports radiator, an oil cooler kit, tow hooks, and racing brake pads, and I think a couple of other things. Other variants included the PC, the R3, the Spirit R, the Kuro, the Nemesis, and others. Most of these variants were either just cosmetic changes or equipment changes. None of these were particularly fast, and while Mazda claimed 0 to 60 times in 5.7 seconds, independent magazine tests at the time showed the true 0 to 60 times to be around 7.0 seconds. The quarter mile passed by in about 14.9 seconds. The RX-8s were sporty, but never really achieved true sports car status in the eyes of many. Overall, though, the RX-8s were indeed competent cars, but somehow they just didn't catch on among hardcore tuner fans in the United States, mostly because there wasn't a pair of turbos stashed under the hood. Fortunately, that did not dissuade Universal from sliding one of these cars into the roster for Tokyo Drift. Neela's 2003 RX-8 was yet another creation of Hironao Yokomaku, owner and master designer over at Veilside in Japan. I actually visited him, I think it was 2003. Veilside was the company, of course, that created Han's RX-7 and the DK's 350Z widebody cars, among others, in that movie. So it was only logical that this RX-8 caught the eye of Universal's picture car team. The Hero 1 car was fitted with Veilside's VSD1 GT kit, the initials VSD1 meaning Veilside D1 as in D1 Grand Prix. In short, the body kit was specially designed to handle the rigors of drift competition. So what does that mean? The front bumper houses a huge Greddy front mount intercooler, which helps send chilled air from the Greddy T618Z turbo kit into the intake. The hood is a Veilside carbon piece, and it conceals the Greddy T618Z turbo kit, which provides just a modest 5.6 psi of boost. Boost is kept low in deference to the limitations of the Renesas rotary engine. Cold air is provided by a Greddy Air-Inks intake that feeds the turbo, and the turbo is internally wastegated for anybody who is curious about that. The body kit retailed for about $5,000 back in the day. The exhaust note comes from a Tanabe Super Medallion hyper-spec catback dual muffler system with 70mm main piping and 100mm tips. The final alleged power output was about 305 horsepower, which by sheer coincidence is almost exactly the power rating of Dom's red RX-7 in the first movie. I want to mention that when Edmunds tested this car though, it ran a 6.70 to 60 time and a 14.9 second quarter mile. But by the time Edmunds got their hands on this car for testing, it had been abused for the movie. In fact, it was only dynoed at 191 horsepower. So while it may have been making 305 horsepower when it was first built, it seems that the movie abuse had taken its toll. Suspension was pretty simple. It was just upgraded a little bit with a set of Tane progressive springs. Didn't need to be all that low because it is a movie car. Wheels for the car at the time were the Volk GT AV 19 inches rolling on 275/30s and 245/35 19 Toyota T1Rs. I'm not sure how many of these cars were built though, but at least one was for sale on New Era's website. As I said repeatedly, the graphics for most of the Tokyo Drift cars were, in my personal opinion, unimaginative. Further, I'm of the opinion that Universal once again missed an opportunity to embrace the Japanese anime or manga styling influences, and Tokyo Drift would have been the perfect movie in which to do so. I'd much rather see something like this, but instead, we are once again treated to swishes, slashes, geometric shapes that have no precedent or acceptance in the tuner segment and never have. But it is what it is. In the end, some people liked it and some didn't. The interior mods were pretty limited, basically Takata harnesses and a Nardi steering wheel, so there's really nothing to talk about there. Like most of the cars used in the Fast and Furious movies that came after Too Fast, Too Furious, Universal by this time had pretty much stopped dressing up the interiors of movie cars unless it was absolutely necessary for the storyline. This is why nearly all the cars after Too Fast, Too Furious are essentially built as stunt cars. This car came to be in Tokyo Drift through the relationship between Veilside Japan and New Era Imports. New Era's relationship with Universal helped the production team bring right-hand drive cars to the United States for filming. Now you might be a little confused, it's Tokyo Drift. Why did Universal need to bring cars to the US for filming of a movie called Tokyo Drift? Simple, because 90% of Tokyo Drift was filmed right here in Southern California. I've done a whole video of that, and if you missed it, you should check it out. The big moment for Neela's RX-8 comes when actress Natalie Kelly and Lucas Black are night drifting, and that scene was actually filmed off of San Gabriel Canyon Road, Route 39 at the southern tip of the San Gabriel Reservoir, as shown here. If you watch the night drifting scene carefully, you'll probably notice that the roads were wetted down. This was to help the less powerful RX-8 to drift with less effort and to make it easier for the more powerful cars to drift at lower speeds so we could get the shots needed. So while Neela's RX-8 wasn't the fastest car in the movie, it was certainly worthy of an appearance. While its presence in Tokyo Drift is further proof that Universal's picture car team was open-minded, I can't help but think a Toyota Chaser, an SW20 MR2, a Z32, Nissan 300 ZX, or cars like that might have been a more popular choice. I said the same thing about the first movie too, though. So while RX-8 owners might be accused of having piston envy, they can take solace that their beloved RX-8 got its moment in the spotlight and can now be counted alongside the other JDM legends.